Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Stollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Today we're going outside the studio to New York City, where guest interviewer Roy Schwartz talks to comic legend Chris Claremont at the second annual JewCE convention.
This is part of the JewCE, the Jewish Comics Experience Convention at the Center for Jewish History in New York. I'm Roy Schwartz. I'm the co-curator of the JewCE Jewish Comics Experience exhibit, co-producer of the JewCE documentary, which is screening right now in a different room, event programming consultant, and this year's awards committee chair. And it's my pleasure to welcome Chris Claremont. Thank you for being with us today.
And if you'll pardon me, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Chris Claremont, in case you didn't know, is a comic book industry superstar, best known for his work on Marvel's X-Men. He's the co-creator of characters like Dark Phoenix, Rogue, Gambit, Sabretooth, Kitty Pryde, Mystique, Legion, and the New Mutants, among many others. Chris originated and wrote the first Wolverine series, helping make the character a household name, as well as the New Mutants and Captain Britain. He wrote some of the most famous and influential storylines in comic book history, including the Dark Phoenix saga and Days of Future Past. His storylines have been the basis for the X-Men movies, as well as TV shows, cartoons, video games, and toy lines. Chris helped turn the X-Men, a struggling property since its inception in September 1963, created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, into a top-selling comic series and a multi-billion-dollar global phenomenon. His initial unbroken 17-year run on the Uncanny X-Men, extremely rare in the industry, culminated with the launch of a new title, X-Men, in October 1991. The first issue, X-Men 1, holds the Guinness World Record for the best-selling single comic of all time, with sales of 8.1 million copies. By conservative estimate, Chris has sold more than 750 million comics worldwide. Chris has also written seminal characters such as Batman and Superman for DC Comics and is a New York Times bestselling author of 9 novels. He has won numerous awards throughout his career and in 2015 was inducted into the Will Eisner Comics Industry Hall of Fame. Once again, welcome.
My pleasure.
We have a diverse audience here today, and some may not be as familiar with your work, so some of my questions will be ones you've heard before, and hopefully some are new ones. So we'll begin at the beginning, which is, how did you get into comics and to work on the X-Men?
By accident. My college, Bard College, back in those days would shut down from 1st January to basically the beginning of March. Officially, this was called field period, and the students were sent out to get jobs in the real world hopefully related to their major field. January of 1969 was not what one could call an encouraging time for anyone at a vaguely liberal school, especially one that was number 2 on the government's drug hit list. We were 99.3%, I think, of use of illegal substances, and Berkeley was 99.29. So they were hot on our heels, but the point was, our 99.3 was, out of a student body of 460 people, was like 420, and their percentage out of a student body of 16.4 thousand was much higher. So they got top billing out of consideration. So working in government, because I was a political theorist back then, was not feasible. Working on Broadway, because I was also an actor, wasn't feasible either. January is not a good time to open a play. But I was also a writer, and my parents knew Al Jaffe. Those of you who might be familiar with Mad Magazine knows that Al's history was doing the fold-ins on the back cover, which were brilliant. And so I thought this was a cool idea because working for Al Jaffe, working at Mad Magazine, that would rock. Unfortunately, Al called my parents and said, there is no way in hell I'm going to nominate Chris for a job like this. Do you have any idea what we do there? But I have this friend. And so the next thing I knew, I got a call from Stan Lee. And Stan's intent from giving the call was, aside from doing a favor for his friend, was to tell me as gently and emphatically as possible that no company in the world, especially one as broke as Marvel, is going to hire some moron kid for 2 months and then have him leave. I mean, you know, we don't have that kind of budget. So he was just getting to the second sentence of this, and I said, well, sir, I've been doing this for academic credit. We're not allowed to ask for wages. You're hired! A philosophy that Marvel has remained embraced to this present day. So next thing I knew, I was a gopher, an intern in the present tense, working, doing whatever they had that needed doing. And it was way cool. At the time, Roy Thomas and Neil Adams were turning out their brief but brilliant run on Uncanny. It was really, really cool. And when I got to the end of it, I thought, when I had to go back to school, I thought, dude, this is easy. I should write something and send it in and see what happens. The rest, as they say, is history.
So every superhero concept is a metaphor. The X-Men are, look, maybe,
Every
hopefully.
superhero concept is a quest for the rent.
So on that note, the X-Men are mutants, which is a small race of people hated and persecuted by a humanity that considers them inferior and simultaneously a threat. They're proud of being mutants, but since many of them can pass for normal humans, they assimilate in public by hiding their differences. And they attend a private school in New York dedicated to teaching them about their special heritage. This all sounds awfully Jewish to me. And I'm wondering, how much of this do you think was in the back of Lee and Kirby's minds, or forefront, and how much of their personal and cultural experiences shaped the X-Men before you came along?
Every superhero concept comes from a brilliant pop into the head of the creators. I mean, you might as well accuse Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster of, dudes, where did Superman come from? Krypton. There you go. Marvel, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby basically just sat down, and once Stan had gotten the green light to build basically the Marvel Universe, which he did with his wife. He was ready to quit and go off and write his great American novel. And his wife said, Joni said to him, Stan, you're going to regret it for the rest of your life if you don't do at least one story that is what you want to do. Oh, Joni, Stan, do it. Trust me, do it, then make up your mind. Well, welcome to the first Spider-Man story, an amazing fantasy. And the rest, as they say, is history. But the rest of the Marvel Universe came basically from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby sitting down, putting their heads together, metaphorically, and boom, the Fantastic Four. Boom, Iron Man. Boom, Hulk. God forgive us. You just go down the line, and every other day, every other hour, Stan and Jack are creating something new because that's what the company needed, just to stay alive. Well, one day they came up, well, we're not doing anything with kids, for kids, about kids. Boop, the X-Men. Were they thinking about anything more relevant, focused? I don't know. Stan never said, Jack never said. For me, when I took over the book, in 1974, 75, with the new X-Men just beginning, and working with Dave Cockrum off concepts that Dave and Len Wein had established, I figured, let's just keep going and see what happens next. None of us, at that time, the comic book industry was dying. DC sales were just being slaughtered. Marvel sales weren't that hot to begin with. Our basic thought was this is 1974, by 1980, we'd all be gone. So why not have some fun? So Dave and I started having fun. We'd just throw in an idea that what the heck? Charlie's getting messages from outer space. His true love is calling to him from 5 galaxies away. Let's see what happens next. Marvel said, you've got to bring Magneto back. Isn't he better off in his baby rompers at the bottom of Muir Island? We'd like you to bring him back. Okay, so we brought him back. He looks the same, but he's younger in terms of age and much more powerful than he was before. And because he remembers being reduced to infancy, he's really irked, let us say. And so he's going to pound the X-Men into the dust. But then I started thinking, who is this guy? Why is this guy? Where did he come from? What's driving him? What are the essences of his life and career? Well, okay, he's a little older than Charlie, not much, but a little. Charlie was high school during the Second War. Magneto was in a concentration camp. Wait, who goes to concentration camps? And so I began playing with the reality that perhaps he was one of those victims of the Shoah. But he didn't die. He survived. Because while my first field period had been at Marvel, my second field period, I spent 2.5 months working on a kibbutz in Israel, which I thought was really cool because I was like 3 kilometers from where David fought Goliath, and I thought, whoa, this is really nice. Except a chunk of the members of that kibbutz were survivors of the Shoah. And that kind of changes your perception of what is, of A, reality, and B, how one relates to it. It's one thing to read about it in a book. It's one thing to watch a movie about it. And since one of the movies they showed while I was there was Judgment at Nuremberg, guess what? We watched it. But it's something else altogether to meet someone for whom it is not fiction, for whom it is not a piece of history. It is a piece of their lives. That tends to change things. Sometimes a little, sometimes a lot, sometimes right at the moment, sometimes an evolution 10, 20 years in the future. So in asking the questions about Magneto, the who, the what, the where, the when, in finding out in my own head what makes him tick, why is he doing the things that he does? Well, the answers started coming in. If I have the power to control magnetism, which is pretty much a primal superpower, what will I use it for? I will save my people. Well, who are your people? Mutants are my people. I have been through one Shoah. I'm not going to have my descendants, my friends, the people I know, go through another. Okay, that's a starting point. But where do we go? How do we get there from here? He does not see himself as a villain. He does not see himself as evil. Driven, yes, but not evil. He's trying to save his people. does that make him evil? And if it doesn't make him evil, should we, in what way, in what manner, in what time, present that to the audience? Well, welcome to X-Men 150, where Magneto is ambushed by the X-Men who he thought he depowered. Well, guess what? Without powers, they're just as dangerous as when they have powers, perhaps even more so. But in the process of the fight, he punches Kitty, and she slams down against the floor, and look, Magneto has just almost, perhaps seriously injured, perhaps worse, a 13-year-old girl. And for a moment, he rants at her as he would any other superhero, and then he realizes, oh my God, what have I done? Because his daughter, his 13-year-old daughter, was murdered by racists. That's what drove him to become who he is. I have become that which I claim to hate. How do I deal with that? And when Aurora confronts him and tells him, if she is harmed, say your prayer, I'm going to rip your heart out. And he says, go ahead. I've lost all understanding of who I am, of what my life is, of where I go from here. I have become that which I feared and hated. Just do it. I don't care. Well, they don't do it. But from that point on, he evolves. He changes. You know, phrase, he grows up. He starts to grow up. And he and Kitty have a bond. They go to the opening of the Shoah Memorial in Washington, D.C. Eventually, Charlie blackmails him into taking over the school. Eventually, after that, he is put on trial before the World Court, and he accepts it and accepts their verdict. Of course, in the process, he and the X-Men save the World Court from being massacred, so they give him a getaway. But my point was to show the evolution of this person, this man, this not a character, not a figure on a page, a person. And hope that the audience would find this really cool and keep buying the books. For me, as a writer, as a storyteller, this is what matters. It's not what happened, but that's because publishers and storytellers have different focuses, different perspectives, different needs from the characters that they have on the table before them. I had gone, in their opinion, a step too far. Welcome to the real world of publishing. But that is how I saw him. And perhaps there's an alternate universe where he did go on from there. And maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. Who knows? Welcome to creation.
You were the one who developed Professor Xavier and Magneto's relationship. You gave him the backstory of meeting in Israel while they volunteered in a psychiatric hospital for Holocaust survivors in Haifa.
Forgive me for interrupting. You have to bear in mind that this storyline evolved in, for want of a better phrase, the 70s. A very long time ago in a galaxy very far away. Again, none of us figured out that we'd reach the 21st century and everything would still be going strong. So times have changed. Backstories have to change along with it.
Sure. What I was wondering is, you talked a few minutes ago about how Magneto, in part, was shaped by your time in a kibbutz in Israel and reading the Holocaust survivors. I was wondering if expanding that storyline to having them meet there and bring Xavier into that was also shaped directly by your visit.
Magneto, his job after the war was working with the CIA, hunting down Nazis. Best thing, he loved it. You know, until I wrote the story where it turns out the CIA was trying to find the Nazis so they could recruit them, but that's a whole different discussion.
Which actually happened, if you guys don't know.
The problem is that governments don't always do things that their people think are appropriate. Good for fiction, not so good for reality. But the idea here was they're best friends, they're polar opposites. Where can we go from there? That's the challenge. The writer's job is then to execute that challenge in a way that will keep the reader coming back for more. And forgive me for saying that. I'll probably say it a dozen more times. But this isn't just about the characters, it's about the readers. You find a way to move one element along in a way that will attract the reader, persuade the readers, lure the readers, just drag them along with you.
Just before we move on, I wanted to touch on one more thing about Xavier and Magneto's relationship. You're also the one who made them frenemies. And I don't know if it's widely known, you base Xavier on David Ben-Gurion, Israel's founding prime minister, and Magneto on Menachem Begin, Israel's 6th prime minister. And I would like to know why.
And someone for whom the British had a shoot-on-sight order, they didn't like him. Which, speaking as an English person, yet another thing we have to apologize for. Oh, the list is very, very long. Yeah, but that's it. But by the same token, people looking at it today would look at it as Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. For all anyone knows, go 10 years ahead and it will be someone else more relevant to the audience of that time. That's the difference between novels and Marvel comics, just put it in simplistic form. J.K. Rowling's books are hers. George Martin's books are his. They don't have to change. They are there. No one's going to fool around with them. Marvel's comics are Marvel's. They will evolve as Marvel and Disney see fit to make them more relevant to the current audience that they are selling to today. I suspect that the gambit that will come out of Logan, Deadpool, and yes, I'm gonna give Wolverine top billing because Wolverine is cool and Deadpool should wash his face more often. I mean, you know, is his sweetie gonna kiss him? Oh, never mind. That's just too. Ugh. Anyway, and yes, I am prejudiced, but they will evolve. They will make the characters relevant to the world that they are selling the characters to, which is, you know, it's like, welcome to reality, our reality. You take a deep breath and you move on because that's nothing you can do about that.
Kitty Pryde, you and John Byrne introduced her in 1980 in Uncanny X-Men 129. She is, believe it or not, it's 1980, but she's the first recurring explicitly Jewish superhero in mainstream comics. Why did you make her Jewish?
Why not?
Fair. Next question.
No, John thought it would be cool. I thought it would be cool. We did it. I mean, sometimes the audience thinks too much about what we're doing, especially when you're going back that far. We're just throwing darts at the target. And sometimes it's a bullseye, and sometimes less so. We don't know how anyone's going to react to it, but what the heck? I mean, the worst that could happen is we get yelled at by the comics code, get yelled at by the editor. Next issue, we erase the Star of David, we move on. On the other hand, if we establish her as who she is, and we weave that into the book, sometimes you could end up with a moment, as in God Loves Man Kills, the X-Men graphic novel, where the fact that she is Jewish, the fact that she is a mutant, suddenly brings the confrontation with a fellow kid in dance class to a head in a way that is relevant to the real world outside. That's what it's all about, because as a consequence of those scenes in God Loves Man Kills, I ended up getting that book and my name put up on, oh God. 700 Club. Thank you. The 700 Club, and being declaimed as racist and a creation of the devil. But
Cool.
you can laugh, but there's a whole lot of people out there for whom that description, that show, that person is real. Fine. Then part of the point of that story was, and what I would say at the time and still today, if you have only one X-Men ever to read in your life or anyone else's life, read that story. Why? Because that's the essence of what I was trying to do. Well, then for 16 years, now for the better part of a half century, to establish this is not a minor confrontation. This is racism at its core. It doesn't matter that Kitty's Jewish. It doesn't matter that some of these characters are gay, that some of them are black, that some of them are Asian, that some of them are indigenous. All of them are targets. Why? Because they're different. Why are they different? Because there's a gene that goes a little bit one way, whereas a great many other people's genes go the other way. And that scares these other people, regardless of whether the mutants are kids, regardless of whether they're fighting to save the world, regardless of every aspect. The mere fact that they are mutants makes them scary. And a lot of people are scared by what they perceive as scary. And a lot of the time, I found myself writing the stories and trying to say, why?
That's all the time we have for this episode of Comic Culture. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.